My name is Chris Morris. I'm the archivist at the Computer History Museum. Today is October 11th, and I'm interviewing Hans Bernhardt for the VMware Founders Collection. This interview will become part of the collection of the Computer History Museum. Hans, thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
You are welcome. Thank you.
And just for the record, tell us your current title and where you are located.
I'm in Palo Alto. That's a good location. My title is, wow, it's really funny to answer that because I'll just say cloud architect. There's the official title that you get as part of your employment, but what I've been doing for years is led up to being a cloud architect on my team. Mm-hmm. And my team is the Livefire Solutions and Services team. We're a group of engineers who take all the pieces and parts of VMware, all the different softwares, and then teach our partners how to assemble solutions out of them so they can go to our customers and say, yes, it can be built, and here's how.
I think that you are officially the person we're interviewing with the longest tenure at VMware.
Really?
Yes.
There's a few more in front of me. Merdad, well, Ole's not here anymore. I mean, but he's still in town, so definitely interview him. Pratap, who else? There's a couple. So
how did you come to work at VMware?
Now, interesting story, and I'll try not to talk too long. In the late 90s, I was working for NASDAQ. And EDS, back then IT was kind of more of a rocket science. You got to do a little bit of everything. And you had to have your hands in everything. So our grassroots team of IT people who were traveling around the country, we were the IT for NASDAQ. We didn't do the internal, we didn't do the ticker, but we did everything else. And then we got outsourced to EDS, or they subsumed us when they took over the IT. So a guy named Samit Panu, I'd recommend to interview him, hunt him down and interview him if you can. He wanted to move back to California. He started to research companies, and he found this little startup called VMware, and he got all excited about it. And while he was interviewing Diane Green, if I remember correctly, he started talking about his director, Len Ceruzzi, also my boss, because Samit and I were on the same team, and how things were changing with NASDAQ and EDS. And Diane Green was like, I want somebody with some business smarts, to be running my IT organization. And again, this is hearsay, but the bottom line is Samit came out, Len came out, next thing you know, they were pulling on me. I came out, another guy named Charles Back came out, another guy named Chris Romano came out. Chris Romano ended up being, I think, our first official hire system engineer. Mm-hmm. So it started the from East Coast to West Coast. I moved here in 2000, drove across country with my little Australian cattle dog, which is another story. I got here in April of 2000 and joined the tech support team. So Samit and Len were doing IT. I joined tech support, and then my career progressed from there. So that's a short answer to your question.
That's a great answer.
Thank
you. Sorry. I like to ask people like yourself, what was it that sparked your interest in technology? What made you excited about working in this field? So
in the old days, back when I was your age, and at Virginia Tech, I studied electrical engineering. And I got hired into a computer job before I had actually graduated, in an IT job before IT was kind of considered even a career. And then when I finally graduated, I went back into electrical engineering, but then at that job, a place called Newport News Shipbuilding, they needed somebody to run their IT for them in the office in a DC area, so guess who got to do that? And then I was like, well, I could be making a little bit more money doing this, and I do enjoy doing this, and so I was like, I'm gonna go do IT. Mm-hmm. And again, back in the 90s, IT was, you got your hands on a little bit of everything, and so it was, pretty interesting, pretty fascinating, and fun. It was always interesting. Mm-hmm. Running around to computer shows and grabbing computer parts and building computers back then. And then hooking up the network inside the house so that my roommates and I could play Network Doom. And I'm sure many people resonate with that one.
Yes, I'm sure they do. Tell me, what was VMware like when you started?
So I was employee 65, and there was a genuine sense of excitement and fun in that. There's several facets to it. One, I think all of us realized, we were surrounded by an incredible set of minds, incredibly smart people. I remember Lennon and Sumit talking about just the brilliance around them, and when I walked in, it was like, yes, they're right. And it was a little bit intimidating, but it was also really neat that everybody was so extremely helpful. I talk about Ole, we've been friends for years, incredibly intelligent guy who's extremely encouraging and fosters, your talents, or I'll say fosters your talents kind of thing. So there's that aspect to it, the excitement, the brains, but then also the fun. And one of the things that I like to point out to our new hires in our boot camp is our original charter that literally says have fun in it. And I always go down to that line because right from the beginning, I started, I was doing my technical job, but I also started interacting with the people at the company and playing some practical jokes, having some fun. But it all worked together as one big happy family, with focus on making this virtualization thing work.
Can you talk a little bit about the launching and success of VMware's first product, like from your seat?
April of 2000, I think Workstation 2.0 had just come out. And I remember our first $10 million picnic. The new hires of that, I think it was quarterly we did the picnics. The new hires of that quarter had to put on a picnic. So my buddy Jeff Hansen, who ended up in charge of real estate and workspace for the longest time, he and I ended up going to Costco and getting all the supplies for that. And we had that at 3145 Porter, and that was our first $10 million ever. Again, Workstation 2 had come out. Originally, the product was just called VMware. Then it was renamed VMware Workstation. And then, like I said, Workstation 2 had just come out. And we were starting on GSX and ESX, for 2001 timeframe. And, sorry, I'm losing my mind there for a second. Your original question being?
Just kind of the company went from having a product that very few people knew about. They kind of targeted who they wanted to sell it to. And then around 2001 with Workstation 2, that's when the product starts kind of like flying off the shelves, right?
Well, one of the stories to validate is that when our website started, our first website said there's no shipping product, and then they opened it up and said, you can go back to the Wayback Machine and you'll find that website. And then when we finally released the product, our website crashed. That's the story because there was so many downloads that it crashed. And the story is that somebody wrote to Diane Green and Mendel Rosenblum to say, please don't sue me. I put up a mirror site so that people could download your product because it's so popular and we love it so much. And the thing about Workstation being virtual machines on the hosted platform on existing Windows and Linux boxes is that it gave our power users and developers the ability to have their own virtual machines and complete control of them versus having to get a whole bunch of other physical computers side by side. They could have virtual machines side by side on one physical computer, and that made them ecstatic. They immediately saw the value in that. And we had started formulating the plan for, I'll call it native virtualization, bare metal virtualization, where it didn't depend on the underlying host operating system of Windows or Linux. And I like to describe it as we could walk into a company and kind of pulling their tails, like, come here, look over here, look what your developers using. They can have their own libraries of virtual machines on a hosted platform on this Workstation product. Oh, and we'd like to go in your data center with this native product. And so there was a transition there, but it moved very quickly because the bare metal product, ESX, could give performance guarantees. And once the customers started to see that, see the benefits of consolidating workloads onto single physical computers with virtual machines and have performance guarantees, things progressed from there, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell me about your career trajectory. You started in
Tech support. And then, I hate talking, so I'm just joking. A woman, Martha Jensen, I think her name. So Craig Williams, let me talk about these people first.
Yeah.
So I'm in tech support with Charles Kenneth Owens, another one to talk to. He's still with VMware. Michael Nisley, rest in peace. So sorry, I get a little bit sad about that because he was first awesome. I mean, Lynn was an awesome boss. Michael was an awesome boss. I have a list of awesome bosses, and like Michael was a really good guy. He fostered us for who we were, and I really enjoyed him because he was a deadhead, and he was set on not micromanaging us. And then he got this nuclear reactor named Hans, who saw what needed to get done and would just go do it, and needed some guidance, some guardrails. And sorry, I'm diverging for a moment, but this is a good heartfelt story about the management style at VMware, if you will. And one day we had a conversation. He's like, you know, hey, I noticed like your numbers are low over here on the tech support side, and you're doing these other things. And I was like, well, you know, you gave me permission to do these things like the marketing trade shows and such. And but I understand I need to be working on this over here. And then he had that conversation again with me. And I said, well, look, I was like, here's the thing. I was like, the team, we love you. And I know you're worried about micromanaging us. But the thing is, like, just push us in a direction, put some guardrails up, and whap us upside the head every now and then. And we totally respect that. We totally respect that. And you're not micromanaging us. And I said, you got to do that to me, because I would just go do things that I see need to get done, especially in a startup mentality. And he listened, and he did exactly that. And you know, my numbers went up because I was focused on what I was supposed to be focused on, and I could still do those other things, but he would correct me when needed. But the team as a whole elevated its performance. And what's really cool about that is we can go back to those years and think about, you know, we felt like kind of like one of the jokes is baby monkeys in a room, because there's just a few of us: Al Boddy, Ken Owens, Charles Back, myself, Chris Inglis, Mustafa Khalil, and Michael Nisley in the earliest days. And we were it. I mean, that was tech support. And we were just all figuring ourselves out. And now all of us have taken kind of trajectories, if you will. And we had a lot of fun back then. And we had a lot of free time. I won't call it free time. I'll call it proper playtime, to be politically correct, if you want to call it that, in a business sense. And now we joke about, like, we don't have time for that anymore because we just all stay so busy in our respective areas. But back to your original question, which was
career trajectory. So what did you do after tech support?
So tech support, Craig Williams was hired as our first ever instructor. He ended up in the same room with us. We had no cube walls or anything. And then Martha Jensen came along, and she was like, hey, teach me about this workstation stuff. And I said, okay. And I was like, I got in front of a whiteboard, and I started whiteboarding forward, just as I thought I should. And she looked at me and she said, I think you should be an instructor. And I'm like, really? I'm like, okay. And I talked to Jason Martin, who is in charge of our professional services, and he was like, sure. And I was like, okay. And did a test teach. And next thing you know, I'm an instructor for a couple of years, traveling the globe from 2003 to like 2005, teaching our original GSX and ESX, and eventually Virtual Center. And then one day, the potential of becoming something called a system engineer came along. That's the short version of it. And I went to a guy named Scott Harvey, and I was like, what's this system engineering thing? And I say this because it was so early on in a career. It's like, you know, you're this young person that's like discovering these things at a startup, and these things kind of evolve. It's not like walking to a large company. Like, NASDAQ, and you've already got predefined roles. And so Scott Harvey, when I talked to him about being a system engineer, he was like, "You're mine." And so next thing you know, I'm a system engineer. And a guy named Dino Cicerelli organized our first ever VMworld in 2004 with Scott and some of the other system engineers. Mike O'Reilly is another name to definitely talk to. He's a walking history book. Plus, he has Rubbermaid containers full of whatever equipment you need, and he can just reach in one, pull it out, and assemble something right in front of you. He's at that level of engineer. But so they had their first VMworld in 2004, and in 2005, Dino said, "Hey, I hear you can organize things." I'm like, "Really?" Well, he had a daughter, and this is where things start to tie together from multiple bubbles, like a Venn diagram. He had a daughter that had muscular dystrophy, or was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, and he found out that I had been organizing entertainment for muscular dystrophy summer camp for years. And one of my requirements of being hired was that there was a week that was sacred to me, and that I would be wanting to do this camp. And it was a no-brainer. You know, Michael was like, "Yes." Michael Nisley was like, "Yes, you can have this week to go do muscular dystrophy camp." And then I had been doing that, flying back to Virginia, putting on this camp entertainment. Had just started to do it in California as well. And then Dino said, "I hear you can organize things." And he put me on his labs core team for VMworld Labs. Interestingly enough, the skill set of organizing a summer camp and organizing lab teams and also getting in front of people and teaching technical things, it all overlaps, which was a whole separate lesson to behold. As a matter of fact, I wrote about it in John Arasheed's, one of his books. John Arasheed and Mark Gabrielski, they write an architecture series, and they recently published a book about architecture failures, or IT failures. And I actually put a story in there about being in front of kids with muscular dystrophy on stage for the first time and feeling scared about it, and also being in front of technical people trying to teach stuff for the first time and being scared, overlapping the two, and then realizing, wait, this isn't about me, it's about them. How can I make an environment for them to completely enjoy what they're seeing and being involved in? And a long story short, again, Venn diagram of the different areas of your life overlapping. So Dino's now got me in 2005 forward doing hands-on labs, being on the core team. And it wasn't even a part of my core job. But at the same time, I'm a system engineer on the corporate SC team, and a guy named Dean Clark came along, who's now retired. Awesome guy, awesome boss. He fostered the corporate SE team from a small handful of people to, I think when he retired, it was like, I don't know, 60 to 100 people. That would have to be validated. But a theme here, a trend, as I ramble, is started small tech support, moved over to small education organization. Tech support's growing, education's growing, moved over to small system engineering team, system engineering's growing. And so it's like, the joke that we have about me at VMware is that I'm a poster child for a lateral movement. I mean, Betsy Sutter and I joke about this all the time, because there's always these puddles of opportunity. And so it was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, this is fascinating, it never gets boring. But hands-on labs persisted for years. From 2005, I finally stopped doing it in 2013. There's a whole long-winded story I could tell you about the people of hands-on labs, the evolution of hands-on labs, the technology of hands-on labs, when we started using nested virtualization and creating, like I said, virtual machines inside of virtual machines. Can't tell all that here, but that was like a parallel path to my career in being a system engineer. And then finally one day Dino said, "Hey, I'm starting this cloud team." That was like 2010. Do you want to be on this cloud team? When our official cloud software was coming out, VMware Cloud Director, and I was like, "Sure, I'll join you on that." And then the cloud team, one of the challenges we had, because this was going to be a new business unit, and it was going to be run like a startup within the larger company. And one of the challenges we had was getting the original software that was built to be, the cloud software, VMware Cloud Director, in front of our system engineers, our consultants, our technical account managers, and what have you, as soon as possible as it was coming out, so that they would know about it and they could get in front of their customers and say, look what's coming, now it's here, now we can start building things for you. And so I ended up doing more project managing than teaching for a little while, because we came out with what we called the vCloud Roadshow, and we traveled around the globe to different cities to educate our employees on, like I said, vCloud Director and other software around that. So it was really fun because I'm on this cloud team. I'm getting to interact with all these huge brains, pre-sales and post-sales. I'm getting to help organize them, around the globe. In the meantime, you've got hands-on labs every year, and then we got into the nested virtualization that turned into the huge, global lab cloud that it is now. And analogy. One thing I want to point out there. One of Dino's analogies was, we have raw tuna that our customers need now in terms of like technology and software and solutions. They need it in front of them now. That's what your job is as a team. So it's going to be a team of constant change, constant moving, constant putting things together, more solutions, and getting in front of people. Versus the education side that I had been a part of years earlier, their job is to create canned tuna. That was the metaphor. Their job is to create a class, install and configure, manage and performance management, what have you. But that class has to be very prescribed, and customers pay for that class, and they get an X amount of information. Our side of the thing, we're just grabbing jigsaw puzzle pieces and putting them together. And again, raw tuna versus canned tuna, kind of a neat metaphor. I love saying that again and again. And then, what we do and what education does overlaps at some point. So with that said, Dino came up with this concept of getting our core architects in front of our specialists and our partners, the people, again, like I said, who build these solutions for customers. And we came up with the notion of LiveFire, the LiveFire Solutions and Services team. That's what we call it now. And I think it was 2012 we had our first LiveFire. And again, it was piecing together all these different pieces of software into a solution, because they don't all work together immediately. That's never the case. And so you get the brains in the room to say, here's what works, here's what doesn't work, and here's how we can make it work with different techniques, I'll call it, programming, what have you, scripting, automation, what have you. And so LiveFire caught on, and the metaphor of LiveFire was, and still is, there's a fire, some fire out there, forest fire, whatever, and we're going to, drop you in from a helicopter. But before we do that, out there in the mountains, you're going to be with your team out there in the mountains trying to put out a fire. We're going to teach you the tools and the knowledge of what fires are out there, how they behave, and how to put them out. And then when you get there, you will put them out. The metaphor being, you're going to walk onto a customer site, they're going to have a business need, a technical need, put all those together, they're going to have pain points, what have you. It's going to be different no matter where you go. But now you have enough knowledge to be able to get the job done and or pull in the people to get the job done. And so the LiveFire analogy just carried forward to the team of people we have had for almost a decade now. Actually, that is a decade.
It is, yeah.
Whoa.
Or more. And still going strong, that at least as of today.
Yeah. Right now we have a team of people. We just did a session in Palo Alto. Right now they're in Bangalore, and they're going to go to Staines, putting on our VMware Cloud Foundation training for our global systems integrators, to get them all up to speed. Whole nother software.
I do want to talk a little bit more about hands-on labs, because it is a bit legendary.
I would agree. I love those guys. We're like a big family. We are.
So, but that wasn't even your whole even your main job. So what is, just for the lay person out there, what is hands-on labs?
So in the old days, 2004, 2005, you had to have discrete physical equipment in a lab room. And you designed your lab for X number of seats, and people signed up. So in August timeframe, when those registrations came online, boom, they're filled immediately. Now you get a waiting list. And we even allowed people at VMworld to stand in line. You know, if somebody didn't show up, then we'll give you their seat. It was instructor-led, but it was very limited because it was all physical equipment. So we had to haul giant racks of servers, giant storage arrays, and laptops and what have you to the site, and it was just reality. You know, if you're going to install virtual machine software on physical equipment, we have to have the physical equipment to install it on. So 2004, 5, I think it was 2006, we started something called self-paced labs. That's right, because that was on laptops. So that was our hosted products, workstation. VMware Fusion came out around then because Apple had switched to the Intel chip, x86, x64. So now we could have these labs on workstation, on laptops, and Macs with Fusion. And that was one lab room. And another lab room would have racks of servers and have a particular lab. And another lab room would have racks of servers. And another lab room would have racks of servers. And one year in San Francisco, Cisco had a huge, like I want to say 30-yard long giant rack of servers and switches at the bottom of the escalators in Moscone, which we ran, their UCS units, which we ran a bunch of labs off of. In parallel, we had our little self-paced lab room with all those little laptops. So you got big server labs, and you got little laptop labs. In 2007, Mike O'Reilly, he had a lab that didn't have enough physical servers, didn't have enough physical ESX servers, and it was for a product called Lab Manager, which is a precursor to VMware Cloud Director. And so, and if I've got this correct, he knew that at that point you could run virtual machines inside of virtual machines. And so he ran our ESX product on a virtual machine inside, on our workstation product. So that ESX server could be seen as just another manageable unit by Lab Manager. I'm getting all technical on you. But the reality was he was dilly-dallying around in nested virtualization. And I think the reality was all he wanted to do was be able to show more ESX servers present to manage, but not actually run virtual machines on those ESX servers. He told me about that, and I got all excited. And others were in the know. That's the short version, because a lot of people, a team of people put this together. At the end of 2000 into 2008, we introduced our ESXi product. So ESX, console operating system based virtualization, basically all it meant was that the architecture changed from being a little bit heavier to a nice thin layer called ESXi, which would take over your physical server and say you don't have to have this big console operating system, just use this one little VM kernel layer hypervisor is what it's called now. So Mike got me into building a lab based on moving from ESX to ESXi, but he introduced me to nested virtualization, and I was like, whoa, we can do the entire lab in nested virtualization. And so, long story short, I built that thing with a team of people using our workstation product because nested virtualization couldn't be done entirely on ESX yet. That's the short version. This is why I said I have all this documentation to show you the longer version. And I had a thread with Ole about that. You know, Ole, one of our lead developers for years. And so I had a thread with him, and he's like, well, the Intel VT extensions are on, we've program ESX to use those on the servers that have Intel processors, but we're not ready for AMD processors yet or something like that. But in Workstation, it was all programmed for nested virtualization to run. And I know that just kind of like, I'm just throwing it at you, but the bottom line is we were able to build like our first nested virtualization lab to show how to upgrade from ESX to ESXi, but these were virtual machines, where they were running our server platform inside of virtual machines, which back then was like, whoa, you know. Well, then eventually, our ESX software caught up so that you could have an ESX server run a virtual machine and run an ESX inside of a virtual machine. So now you have a virtualization platform with a virtual virtualization platform inside of it. And head explode, inception, the whole 9 yards. And then a guy named Ford Donald, he had been using Lab Manager to deploy multiple things, another person to talk to. And we came up with a concept. Ford, Dino, myself, and others, we put together this concept known as the vPod, where you would have a pod of virtual machines that would be deployed together that were actually ESX virtual machines that represented an entire server room or rack of servers to the person looking at them doing their labs. As far as they were concerned, we gave them a rack of physical servers. But what we had really done on the back end was just giving them virtual machines that were running ESX that could run virtual machines inside of it, which is just like, again, whoa. And 2009 timeframe, we did our first set of labs where we had everybody in the room, this was at our sales kickoff, do labs on ESX servers. But they were actually nested ESX servers. And then we had Curtis Pope and Claire, Claire, what's your last name? I want to say Darling, but I can't remember. But anyways, they came up with a mechanism for resetting everything for the next set of students. And they sat in the back of the room resetting things. It was partially automated. And at the end of 2009, so that was at our sales conference, and then at VMworld in the second half of 2009, they automated the capability of like having the labs just would redeploy on the fly, click a button, get a lab. And there were challenges with it. Let's just put it that way. 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, it's like we moved from using the deployment mechanism of Lab Manager to VMware Cloud Director when that came out, still with the concept of vPods. When you get a vPod, you get an entire data center to yourself, but it's all virtual inside of virtual. And again, there were challenges. That's the nice way of putting it. Challenges to the degree that we were still developing things up until the weekend before VMworld. We were still running it like that. And eventually we wised up and we're like, this has got to be run like a production environment, and it needs to be tested months ahead of time.
Right.
That's a super short version. But in 2009, we that self-paced lab room I talked about, we had the laptops in one part of the room, and we had another part of the room testing out this whole new concept of cloud-based labs with nested virtualization, back then with Lab Manager as a deployment mechanism. And our first challenge was you'd click a button to do a lab, and it would point you to the wrong lab. And buried in the code somewhere was like a 1 and a 0 that had to be changed. I remember that story, and it took them a couple days to figure it out. And we started off by having customers standing in line being all like, we can't get in, we're angry, blah, blah, blah. To, by the end of the week, we had labs just churning. And that was really cool. And then 2010 was, if I have it correct, that was the first year that we said, all right, we're going to do this as our entire lab room. And I remember walking in, seeing a room, I like to say half the size of a football field, maybe not that big, but pretty huge, 480 stations. And it was all based on nested virtualization. But again, we ran into issues because we were trying to do things up until the last second. We always had issues, partly because we had so many labs, and then we had that front-end mechanism to get butts and seats in the labs. something would always break. Something would always be, again, long stories for another day. And we'd go through a period of like, it was like summer camp, back to summer camp. Like, you go through the full emotional swing. You're like, whoa, this is gonna be fun. Oh, that's broken. Oh, we're gonna have to stay up all night to fix that. When does this conference start?
Yep.
And then by the end of the week, it's like everybody's like, whoa, and they're all loving life because we were successful. But we went through some almost like war stories together, where again we had customers waiting outside the door. Not happy, and it's starting to hit the social media feeds like, labs, they're broken, we can't get in. That's the super nice version. And then funny stories like in Vegas, we had them lined out the door, and Irish Spring is another name. Chris Romano, the guy I told you about earlier, and Irish Spring and myself, we ended up being kind of like the people leaders for a little while. And in Vegas, he's like, well, they're lined up outside. Get the bar, get the rolling bar, get some alcohol here, keep those customers happy. Well, we're trying to figure out what's going on in the lab room to get these things fixed. And that's just one facet of the labs. It was just the challenges we went through getting the labs working and the pains we went through until I think it was 2013 is when tech marketing had taken over the labs, and they said, no, we're gonna run this like a production environment. And I said that year to the team, I said, well, look, I've gone from being like somebody that has built pods to teaching you how to build pods to helping manage the team to being kind of like a cheerleader, especially during our dire times and we need to keep spirits up, to if I'm bored this year, well, one of the jokes I had was like, my job is to make myself irrelevant. And if I feel irrelevant this year and I'm bored, I've done my job. And I was like, I'm out of here after 9 years. So that is another thread. So 2013 went well. Another thread in all of that is in 2005, I think the story is Diane Green asked Dino for more labs. And 2005, 2006, which I can't remember. I don't remember which year was Vegas, because I think it was Vegas we did this. It may have been 2005. It was in Vegas. I'd have to go back and look at the notes. But Dino's like, we're maxed out. Back then it was all physical equipment,
Right.
and you had a limited number of people that could actually do labs. So one of the team members said something about, well, why don't we do a rave? Why don't we do a rave in the lab room, and the people can come in the party after the party, the big VMworld party, they can come in afterwards and do labs. And we had some seriously geeky customers because we filled a room. And we did it by ourselves. We brought in a smoke machine. We had the projectors in the room doing anime and such. And I think Adam Zimmett is another name. He's got the microphone making like various announcements and all that. We had people coming in, doing the rave, and sitting there doing labs. And it wasn't all the labs. It was like because of the limitations. I think the first one was a P2V rave. Then we had the self-paced rave. The next year, it caught on. It was a super secret party after the party. And one of the things that I would do at the rave, the rubber chicken comes into this. I haven't even mentioned it in all this. There's a whole separate thread of the rubber chicken starting with 2000 when I first got there. But one of the things I would do is I would be throwing rubber chickens all over the room, and people loved that. But the more important thing about the rubber chickens is they became a symbol to the lab team of like, thank you, especially when things got really hectic. And at the end of the week, you've got all these brilliant minds that have been staying up all night making things happen, watching the labs not work, whoop, they work, okay, get to work, and I'll get the customers in here. And then by the end of the week, I'd be tossing little keychain rubber chickens to all of the engineers, all the proctors, all the instructors to say thank you. And that became a tradition to the degree that I still go to see the Hands-On Labs team at VMworld each year on my own dime. After I stopped doing it, I still showed up to make sure that, and I was in Vegas this year. I'll go to Barcelona here shortly and just say, hey, thank you. Here's your rubber chickens. And so everybody who's been around knows about it, and all the new people hear the story and they understand, that this is a symbol of saying thank you for all your hard work. One more facet of that is that 2010 year, that first year that we had that, like I said, the room we like to call, I like to say was half the size of a football field. It did not occur to any of us that a lab room of this size would require a support team for the support team, kind of like nested virtualization. So we've got all these problems, and I'm running around with a pad of paper and listening to people and trying to take them all in. And it didn't occur to me as like, you idiot. It's like, you got 100 plus people here. You've got 480 stations. Maybe you should come up with some way to automate this. Well, enter Amy and Melina. Amy McClarty and Melina, oh no, I can't think of her last name. Melina McClarty and Amy Grood. Sorry, I'm getting your names mixed up. Melina McClarty and Amy Grood. They walked up to me and they were awesome. And they said, hey Hans, we noticed you've been running around with your pad of paper trying to take all these problems in. And they said, well, we've come up with a spreadsheet on Google Docs and turned it into a little form, and there's a web link to it. We can send it to everybody, and iPads had come out by then. And it's like, we can use the existing technology, and people can fill out the form of what the problem is, and we can triage it, and we can send it up to the core team to fix it. And I looked at them, and I looked at Mary Brett, who was our project manager, and I said, put a table there, please, 2 laptops, and you are now our support team. But it was an awesome interaction because it took us from grassroots to, here's a problem, fix it, to now it's baked into our actual lab portal software. And we have an entire support team around making sure that all of the proctors and instructors are supported, who then support our customers. And that grew from support team to the actual official help desk, which brings up another thread of Hands-On Labs, which is in the early days of when it became Hands-On Labs, it was, I don't want to say, bad word is insular. That's kind of a negative connotation, but it was inward focused, meaning at the center of the room we had this big tower. And in the tower was the core team, behold, the mighty core team. We're above you, we're looking down at you. I mean, the one time they liked it was when I was throwing rubber chickens at them. But otherwise it was like nobody could go up there. It was special. But we had all that technology in the tower making these labs happen. And nobody could see it except for an executive would come along, hey, you want to come up into the tower and see all this technology? And it didn't occur to anybody. It's like, hey, this should be actually facing outward. People should be seeing this technology and seeing the awesomeness of what we've done here. But better yet, after tech marketing took over in 2013, they did a complete shift, if you will. And when I saw what they did, I was like, I love this. This is incredible. It's about the people, not the technology. And what they did was they got rid of the center tower. Bill Call used to call it the God Pod because we're up there in the God Pod. And they got rid of that, and they put the core team at the back of the room, but down at floor level, very accessible, and you could see what they were doing. And then the center of the room became the support team, the help desk, and they were very accessible. And then they took it a step further, and they put screens up around the room that would show little bios of all the instructors and proctors. So it became very people-centric. And I think it was a natural evolution of things because we were so focused on just getting this working, all this technology, just get it working, that it hadn't occurred to us yet that, okay, now that we've got all this working, let's start, sharing this with everybody. And not just sharing the technology, but now let's share everybody who's responsible for making this technology happen and bringing it to you, and what are their stories, what's their background, and the whole 9 yards. So back to your original proposition that Hands-On Labs is kind of, we'll say, epic. I mean, there's all these threads that went through the years of evolving it to this global thing now that I could, like I said, I could talk forever about. the people, the technology, the fun, the stress, the trauma we went through. But it's like one of those things where when people from yesteryear of Hands-On Labs, when we see each other, it's like instant hug. It is. We're just like, oh my gosh, I missed you. So you got all that.
Forged in war, absolutely. And I, no kidding, I knew that by asking you about Hands-On Lab that we would come around to the chickens. So tell us about the genesis of the chickens.
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah, that's funny.
In 5 minutes or less.
Okay, oh, my family loves you. All right,
There's your guardrail, Hans.
Smack, smack, smack. All right, the story, and I want to give everybody proper credit here. The story that I typically tell is that, back in the 90s, I got involved with the Muscular Dystrophy Summer Camp and putting on entertainment for the kids, and the chicken came into that because I also have a bunch of friends. We're in a band called the Sauerkraut Band back in Virginia, so you think chicken dance, rubber chickens, and all that. I'll go a little bit more extensive here because I want to give proper credit to where credit's due. So in 1999, before I came to VMware, my brother Eric and I biked to Blue Ridge Parkway. And as a joke, I carried a rubber chicken on the back of the bike the whole way. And people started coming up to us and asking about the chicken. And next thing you know, they're telling us their stories. And we're talking about it, and we're having all this interaction. So it's like my brother realized what was going on before me and kind of poked me on the shoulder. And he realized that it's kind of breaking down barriers of communication. People are telling stories. This is actually really interesting. When I got to VMware, I started to play practical jokes with the chicken. Diane Green, they had her birthday. I gave her a rubber chicken for her birthday. I didn't see that chicken again after that, but I don't know. I know that she and Mendel, they appreciated my humor. So on the VMware front, I would have fun with the rubber chicken. Like I built all of our original server kits with a guy named Bob Slovic. Another name, Bob Slovic. He's still here. He's our license guy. He's saved us a lot of issues over the years with getting licenses for demos and such out the door. But I built these server kits with Bob, and I would stick a rubber chicken in them. So you're an instructor, you travel halfway across country, you get to the training center. Monday morning, you open the server kit up that has entrails of servers because the kits are beat up in shipping, and then a rubber chicken falls out. So, just one of the many fun stories with it. Well, I started to travel, for VMware around the world, and I got pictures of chickens everywhere, and I started to put pictures up on our fun list, our internal email list of various fun things with the rubber chickens. Like I got one of our students to throw it up near in the St. Louis Arch, and I'm like, look, it's a rubber chicken flying through the St. Louis Arch. But I started to give them out as my brother did. He started to give some out at trade shows for the fun of it. And interestingly enough, I started to do it at the same time, kind of in parallel, and then we compared notes. And it just kind of evolved from there. It became a give them out, especially the little keychain chickens, which I actually have some with me. Give these out as, like I said, thank yous, kids, service peeps, big thing being service peeps. So people on campus, our food staff, our custodial staff, engineers, anybody who serves somebody else to make good things happen. Over time, while I was having all my fun with the rubber chickening and not realizing that people were watching me because I get in my own little bubble sometimes, Betsy Sutter was also watching and seeing what I was doing with Muscular Dystrophy Camp, because I was giving up my vacation time in Virginia and California over the summer and formulating in her grand scheme of things, creating the foundation. And the foundation, I think it was 2010 or 2011 when we hired Nickel and we started the foundation. And so it all, I guess I'll say it all ties together, because one of the things the foundation did was they immediately said, hey, all employees get 40 service hours, 40 community service hours. And I won't say that I was the cause of that, but I will say that doing that as part of my just existing at VMware, and VMware very much supporting it, very much supporting me being a serious engineer, but also being a guy who runs around with a rubber chicken and doing all this stuff volunteering. I mean, it all comes around full circle, like I said earlier on, about Venn diagrams overlapping. And I think one of the things that you'll find that anybody you talk to here will say is that the one thing that they love the most about VMware is the people. And that comes with all of these layers coming together like that. So the chicken, back to your original question, I can tell you 10,000 stories. One of the jokes I crack is, do you have 2 weeks and a lot of beer?
There isn't a disc big enough to hold that.
Oh, that's a whole separate book one day.
How has the culture at VMware changed in 23 years?
23
or
years.
has it?
I will say realistically that we've kept our core, which is good. The whole Epic 2 values thing. And we've kept, well, I pointed to fun being in our original charter. Jeff Goodall, myself, others, Hannah Friend, another name. We've been able to, in our individual sense, create our brand and have fun and share that with everybody and have it become part of the overall culture. By the same token, globally, there are other people in the various regions who have been able to do the same. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a really positive thing. Realistically, since we acquired so many companies over the years, it's hard to put cultures together. And there's been ebb and flow. There's been challenges. There's been, there's not so great things that have happened over the years, which that's just natural. That's going to happen. But the bottom line is, like, we've always been able to, in my opinion, pull back into our core culture. And if something goes awry, we've been able to openly say, that's not right. Let's fix it. Let's do something about that. And so, with that said, on top of our technology, our foundation, we started I think it was first women at VMware, and then we started our pods. I think they say it's power of difference. I always thought it was people of diversity, so we'll say it's both. But Latino pod, Black pod, Hispanic pod, disabled pod, veterans pod, did I get them all? Asian pod. So our culture, if anything, like I said, the core has always been there, and then we'll call it like a tree, like an oak tree. It's developed all these things around it to make us like a college campus, where when you're on that campus, you're like, look at all these awesome things I want to do. But you also have to be careful and not, spread yourself too thin. That's some truth of that.
So what this may be opening a huge box, but I'm going to ask a question anyway.
Pandora's box of Hans's stream of consciousness.
What is your favorite thing about VMware?
The people, the fun, the being able to, well, back to the rubber chicken. It's like, one of the jokes I had with my dad was, Dad, you helped put a camera on the moon. I worked for Westinghouse years ago, lunar mission. And I said, but I brought a rubber chicken to Silicon Valley. But the fact that all those things have been able to be present as a complete person at this company, such that I can get in front of people with a sense of engineering authority, but also people, I don't want to say authority, engineering respect, people respect, and have walked the talk, and be able to pull in examples of people all around me, such that when you're in a room with us, you're like, whoa, these are good peeps, and they didn't just build this technology, they built this whole culture of have your back, got your back, enjoy it, and fly, if you will, if that makes sense.
The last question I have on my list, which we ask everyone, is what do you think is the lasting impact of VMware's technology?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. The lasting impact. A multifaceted answer as always.
Of course.
Well, I will say one of the challenges we have right now in the multi-cloud world is like being able to wrangle all that and create a consistent layer for everybody across clouds, containers, the whole 9 yards. I think it will be the, not just innovation. Saying innovation is kind of a generic answer. I think that our mindset has always been to pull, it's hard to articulate, pull the technology back into the people, if that makes sense. The solutions for people in a deliberate sense. In the early days, there was a lot of discovery going on, and we learned things that we had not been thinking about that we should be thinking about. Like something as simple as desktop computing. Our partners are creating this desktop broker to say, here's virtual machines, now log in, boom, now you have access to a virtual machine, that's now your remote desktop. We're like, oh wow, we should start thinking about that. That's actually really cool. But I think over time, our mindset went to, we should think about those kinds of things, ideas, innovations with our technology first, so that we're always moving forward with it, if that makes sense. So I think the lasting impact is going to be that mindset, and I hope people hold on to that. Don't get into just creating widgets. Always be thinking like, here's some cool new stuff. How is it going to impact people? What are they going to do with it that even we don't envision? And are we ready to adopt that and create yet another layer of automation or management or whatever solution?
That's all the questions I have.
Woo! Did I wear you out?
No, not at all. Not at all.
And there's 10,000 more things I could tell you. And of course, I'm going to walk out the door. I'm going to be like, oh man, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. But you know, it's like all for another day.
Well, we can find another day if we need to.
Woo.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. Thank
Thanks.
you.
That's it for today.
That's awesome.
All right. Thanks, Hans.